Today we add a few things to our medieval city in the form of some job boards and signposts. Alright, so today we're going to be using a few things. We're going to use some of these little craft sticks that I got from Michael's, a few large washers, these are about 1 inch in diameter, some popsicle sticks, a few coffee stirrer sticks, and then we're going to use some rectangular barbecue skewers. And a while back I made some city tiles using these. These are some remnants of that, and I thought we could use them today. So we're going to use these. So one of the first things I'm going to do is make a few of these little kind of 4x4s. Since the barbecue skewers look like 2x4s, I wanted them to be a little bit thicker, so I'm just going to cut a few of these to 2.5 inches in length. Then off camera I trim the edges to make them both flush with each other. And then using a little bit of some wood glue, I just kind of laminate them together, and I'm just going to attach them together with a binder clip so that they can dry without being jostled around or moved. And once they were dried, I cleaned up the edges and hid them with some hot glue. Alright, now that we've made those, let's go ahead and make our job board. So one of the first things I needed was a relatively solid backing for the job board. I wanted something to just kind of attach little posters and signs and things like that to. So using a couple of the popsicle sticks, I cut them to roughly 1.25 inches. And then using a little bit of a straight edge, I clipped one down to 1/4 inch in width. Since the popsicle sticks are a little bit over a 1/4 inch, I wanted one of them to be a little bit thinner. Then using some wood glue and a couple of binder clips, I attach them all together and just kind of leave them to dry so that we have a nice kind of flat surface to work with. And then that one that I trimmed a little bit shorter, I attached to what's going to be the bottom, so we have a nice little lip that kind of gives the impression of some kind of little structural support. So here I'm just trimming a few pieces of barbecue skewer at a 45-degree angle. I cut these pieces to be roughly a 1/2 inch in length, and then just trimmed both sides at a 45-degree angle. And now that everything is dried, we can start assembling all of the parts together. So using a little bit of hot glue, I just kind of quickly attached all of the legs to 3 sides of 2 of the 4x4 posts. And this is going to give it a reasonable amount of support so that it can kind of stand up on its own and look pretty realistic. I want it to kind of have the appearance that this is a board that kind of gets moved around the city, or maybe can get moved, in front of a stall or behind a market stall or something like that. So once all the legs are attached, we can grab our little utility knife, clip off any blobs of hot glue that come out, and then with our solid board that we put together a little bit earlier, I mark out a 1.25 inches up from the bottom and then just hot glue it in place. Again, clean up any of the little hot glue blobs and repeat on the other side. Now, we could just leave it like this, but I feel like I want to do a little bit more to it, so let's go ahead and see what else we can come up with. For the base, we're just going to take the little craft stick and hot glue a strip of the foam here onto the bottom of it, and then just kind of clip all the edges off with a pair of scissors. You can also do this with a utility knife. Now, to give this a little bit of extra something, I'm going to add a little support beam across the top here, and this is going to kind of be the framework for a small little roof that's going to go over the top of it. And I clipped these off camera. These are just little tiny, almost triangular pieces of a barbecue skewer, and these are just going to be quickly tacked in place with some hot glue. And this is just going to be a little bit of support for I ended up using a tongue depressor off screen to kind of get the surface area that I wanted. So here you can see what I'm going for. I'm just going to quickly attach the tongue depressor into place with some hot glue and then make sure it's going to be secure along the top ridge. Then using a few shingles that I quickly cut from a barbecue skewer. These are about I want to say they're a little bit over a 1/4 inch, and then I just kind of nipped the edges to give them that kind of shingled roof appearance. And these are just kind of quickly glued into place with some hot glue in a staggered formation. The idea for this was I didn't want it to take a really long time, but I didn't want it to look cheap, so just kind of quickly put this together. So then taking it outside, I gave it a coating in some Krylon flat brown spray paint, and then do a quick little overbrush with some raw sienna. Now this isn't really going to get seen from the bottom all that much, but I like making sure all the details are covered, so I painted the underside of the roof as well. Now I'm not going to really do much with the roof tiles. I'm going to paint them a color on their own, so we're going to ignore them for now. Now once all this is dry, I'm going to use a little bit of some warm gray from Master's Touch and do a kind of a light to medium dry brush over the entire piece except for the roof shingles. And then to kind of make sure that everything isn't as bright and pronounced, I just kind of wipe away some of the paint with my fingers just to kind of help everything blend together. Now, for the roof, you can kind of see a mistake that I made. Off camera, I tried painting it up with a yellow, but that didn't look good, so then I tried an orange, and that didn't look good. So I wiped it off as best as I could, and now here we are with some deep red. I do one coat here on camera, and then I do a second coat off camera, and I think it looked a whole lot better than either of the other two original colors. So, yeah, definitely better this way. Alright, once that's had a chance to dry, I take a little bit more of the warm gray and just do a pretty simple dry brush, giving the wooden roof shingles a nice weathered appearance. Alright, and with that done, we can go ahead and start on our signposts. So, off camera, I took one of the 4x4s and attached some feet to it. Here, I'm just going to attach a simple little cross beam to the top of the board. And this is just going to be the section that a couple of hanging signs will dangle from. Now, using a matchstick, I cut a quick little couple of supports. It's nothing fancy, it's just a 1/4 inch piece of the matchstick trimmed to a couple 45-degree angles, and then using a little bit of hot glue, I tack it into place underneath the cross beam, just to kind of give the impression that everything is being supported. And then I do the same thing on the other side. So now for the signs, I trimmed a couple of popsicle stick pieces to be 1 inch long and just a hair over a 1/4 inch in width. Then using a little hand drill here, I drill out a couple of little pilot holes. These are pretty small, and I didn't want them to go all the way through the signboard, so I just did a little bit of depth and then used them as a guide to drill a couple of holes in the crossbeam so that everything matches up. Alright, so this is an old piece of jewelry that I got from a friend. It's nothing fancy, but it had these nice little loops throughout the whole set, and I decided to clip a couple of them off and use them as kind of a little metal hinge section. So I clipped a couple of them and using a little bit of some gel superglue, tacked them into place on the signboard. Then did a little bit more of the superglue and attached them to the crossbeam. Now once this dries, it worked out really well and they just kind of dangle perfectly in place like this. So really happy with how this turned out. Alright, and here you can see one of the bases that I put together. So once again, took this outside, gave it the same brown spray paint base coating, and then did a fairly generous overbrush with the raw sienna to give it that nice kind of processed timber appearance. Now, whenever you do something like this, always be ready to get a whole lot of paint on your fingers, but if you need to get it off, it washes off pretty easily with a little bit of soap and water and a little bit of decent scrubbing. So now we're going to do the same kind of weathering dry brush with the Master's Touch Warm Gray. And again, I'm going to kind of rub some of the paint off with my fingers to kind of keep it from being too heavy-handed. And admittedly, I probably should have painted the signs before I hung them, but yeah, that's a live and learn kind of moment. Now, I wanted these signs to have writing on them, but I didn't want to, write actual words, because then I kind of run into the limitation of having to use the signs in the same places over and over, and I wanted these to be kind of usable in any situation. So I just did a few little scribbles and some lines to kind of accentuate a few things, just to kind of give the impression that this is fantasy writing from a fantasy world, and it also, as a dungeon master, gives me the ability to say, oh, well, the sign says this, and, just kind of improvise as needed. Alright, so now let's start putting some finishing touches on everything. So to start with, I'm going to paint up all my bases that I made earlier with a little bit of some Artist Loft Gray as a base coating, and I'm going to be sure to get all of the sides as well. I don't want any of the original color showing through if I can avoid it. And I did take these out and give them a base coating with the same flat brown spray paint, just to kind of give a little bit more of a primer coat for the paint to attach to. And once that was dry, I do a dry brushing of some neutral gray. This is a little bit heavier than I originally intended. It's almost like an overbrush, not necessarily a dry brush, but I think it worked out pretty well. Alright, now giving that a few seconds to dry, I'm going to grab some warm gray and just kind of soften the edges of it, doing a little bit of a dry brush. This is going to give a nice little bit of color contrast and really help to kind of blend things together, but you still have the visual of the gray and the neutral gray coming up through the warm gray, and it really kind of worked out nicely. Alright, so now we're going to add some posters to our job board. I found these online. I just did a simple Google search for D&D mini posters free PDF, and I found a couple of different ones, and I really liked these. These were actually called Notice Board Signs and Jobs, and they had quite the few that you could choose from, and they look really nice, and they're a really nice scale. So I'm just attaching them with a little bit of Mod Podge and then painting over them with Mod Podge to kind of make sure that they don't come off. And then we can take a quick little minute to attach them to the base with a little bit of hot glue. Now, I didn't want the hot glue on the base to really be visible, and I didn't want to add a bunch of flocking to disguise it. So using a toothpick before the glue fully dried and cooled, I just kind of rolled it against the hot glue to kind of drag it away from everything and pulled it free. And then I repeated the process with the signposts. Sorry for the blurry camera here, but you kind of get the idea of what I'm going for. Alright, so there we go, and I'll do the rest off camera, and just like that, we are finished with episode 9. Alright, so here we are with a little bit of a market setup. You can see the job board really kind of helps to add a little bit of extra stuff to the area. I've got the signposts here, kind of like they're advertising what's on display in the various little market stalls. And I think it ties everything together pretty nicely. You can easily use these as kind of like road signs and things like that as well. So thank you everyone for watching. Please hit that like button, subscribe for future content, comment in the comments section, and we will see everyone next episode.